Welcome back to Books and Bites, where we break down the best books to save you time.
That's right.
Today, we're diving deep into The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins.
Oh, this is a good one. It really kind of turns things upside down when it comes to how we think about, like, success and happiness.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It basically asks, like, what if letting go of control is actually the key to getting what you want?
That does sound a little counterintuitive. I mean, aren't we kind of like hardwired to try to manage everything?
Totally.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to other people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We want our partners to be a certain way, our kids to make the right choices, like even our coworkers to just behave how we think they should.
Oh, yeah. You see it everywhere.
But Robbins makes this really interesting point. She says this whole idea of control, it's kind of an illusion.
Yeah.
And it's often rooted in, like, fear and insecurity.
Oh, that's interesting. So instead of constantly trying to, like, mold people into what we want them to be, the let them theory is about letting them be themselves.
Yes, exactly. And here's the thing that I think is so cool about it. It doesn't mean you become passive or you become a pushover. It's not like people can just walk all over you.
Okay, good, because that was going to be my next question.
Right. There's a huge emphasis on setting healthy boundaries.
Okay, so I'm trying to picture this. It's like a tightrope walk between giving people freedom but still protecting yourself.
Yeah.
How does that actually work?
Well, think about it like this. You can define your limits without trying to, like, control the other person's actions. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
Imagine you have a friend and all they do is vent about their problem.
Right, yeah.
But they never actually take your advice.
Been there.
Right. It's so frustrating. And you feel like, you just feel like your help is being wasted.
Totally.
So instead of trying to control their venting or, like, force them to take your advice, you could set a boundary. You can say something like, hey, I care about you, but I'm finding it draining to hear these same complaints over and over if no action's being taken.
Well, that's a good example. So instead of trying to control their behavior, we shift the focus to how we respond.
Exactly. And when you do that, something pretty amazing happens.
What's that?
Robbins says it unlocks this pathway to acceptance,
Okay.
which she believes is the foundation for building real resilience.
Resilience. That's a word we hear all the time. But in this context, are we talking about bouncing back from setbacks because we've accepted things as they are?
Exactly. If you're constantly fighting reality, wishing things were different, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And it's honestly kind of pointless. The let them theory suggests that accepting things as they are, even the parts that make us uncomfortable, it actually gives you a much stronger foundation to cope with whatever life throws your way.
Okay. So it's not about giving up. It's about adapting and thriving in the face of what is.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And Robbins actually takes it a step further. She suggests that this whole idea of acceptance, it also allows us to shift our energy. So instead of trying to control other people, we start taking responsibility for our own reactions and choices.
Okay. I'm starting to see how setting those boundaries we talked about earlier plays into all of this.
Yeah.
But what about those times when letting go just feels like impossible? I mean, we're human. We're going to get frustrated. We're going to get angry sometimes.
Absolutely. Robbins acknowledges that, this is a process.
Right.
It's not always easy. And we're going to talk a lot more about, those practical ways to work through those tough moments in part 2.
Okay, great. Because this is already giving me a lot to think about.
Good. I think for now, the big takeaway is just recognizing how much energy we waste trying to control things that ultimately we just can't control.
It's like trying to hold back the tide.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So for everyone listening, we'll be back soon to explore how the let them theory can help you reclaim that energy and use it to create a more fulfilling life, both for yourself and the people you care about.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the let them theory.
It's been really interesting so far. We've talked about this whole idea of, control being an illusion.
Right.
And how letting go is really about accepting people and situations as they are.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to know, like, how does this actually play out in real life?
Right.
Like, how do we actually do let them?
Yeah.
Especially when we're dealing with, like, I don't know, a difficult coworker or a teenager who's, like, pushing all our buttons.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You hit on some really common scenarios where let them can feel like the most challenging.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where Robbins, she gives us some tools and strategies that I think are super helpful. Like, one of the things she talks about is shifting our perspective. So instead of getting caught up in, like, the emotions of the moment, She suggests taking a step back and really trying to understand the other person's perspective.
So instead of reacting, with anger or frustration, we're kind of pause and ask ourselves, okay, why might they be acting this way?
Exactly.
Right.
It's about like stepping into their shoes,
Right.
trying to see things from their point of view, even if you don't agree with it. And when you do that, it can help you kind of detach from your own emotional reactivity.
Mm-hmm.
And you can approach the situation, with more empathy and
I
understanding.
mean, that makes sense, but I feel like that's a lot easier said than done,
Oh, yeah.
especially in the heat of the moment.
Totally.
So are there actual tips for how to do this?
Yeah. Robbins talks about a technique that she calls mental reframing.
Okay.
So it's about consciously choosing to see the situation in a different light. So let's say you are dealing with that coworker who's always missing deadlines.
Right.
Right. Instead of just automatically labeling them as lazy or incompetent, try to reframe it.
Okay.
Maybe they're totally overwhelmed. Maybe they're dealing with something, outside of work. Maybe they just have a different work style than you do.
So it's about kind of challenging those assumptions that we make and trying to find a more generous interpretation.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that you're excusing the behavior, but it does allow you to kind of approach it with less judgment.
Right.
And more compassion.
Yeah.
Which can, open up the possibility for a much more productive conversation.
Okay, so we're seeing how important this, understanding and acceptance is.
Mm-hmm.
But what about setting boundaries?
Right.
How does that fit into let them?
Yeah. Boundaries are super important. And Robbins is very clear that let them is not about being a doormat.
Okay.
It's about honoring your own needs while still allowing other people to make their own choices.
Right.
And it's about communicating those limits really clearly and respectfully without trying to control their response.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to that coworker example, let's say they keep missing deadlines.
Yeah.
Despite, you trying to understand where they're coming from, you might set a boundary by saying something like, hey, I'm happy to help you however I can, but I also have to prioritize my own workload. So if you can't meet this deadline, I'm going to need to let our manager know.
Yeah. You're basically drawing a line in the sand.
Yeah.
But not dictating their actions.
Exactly. You're giving them the freedom to choose how to respond while still protecting yourself.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's about taking ownership of our own well-being.
Yeah.
While recognizing we can't control other people.
Exactly. And that brings us to another really important piece of let them, and that's personal responsibility. Robbins really wants us to shift our focus.
Okay.
Move away from trying to change other people and move towards what we can control.
Got it.
Which is our reactions and our choices.
So it's about recognizing that we can't control the external circumstances, but we can control how we respond to them.
You got it.
Okay.
And that is super empowering because instead of feeling like you're a victim of your circumstances, you become much more of an active agent in your own life.
Right.
You get to choose how you show up, regardless of what's happening around you.
Okay. This is starting to feel like a real mindset shift.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing our own agency.
Yes.
And focusing on what we can influence rather than wasting energy on things we can't.
You got it. And this applies not just to our interactions with other people, but also to how we relate to ourselves. Robbins talks about the importance of letting ourselves be, accepting ourselves with all of our, imperfections and flaws.
I feel like that's one of the hardest things to do these days, with all the pressure to be perfect and constantly improve ourselves.
It's so true.
Yeah.
But Robbins argues that true self-love, true acceptance, it comes from embracing who we are right now in this moment with all of our quirks and complexities. It's about letting go of all that self-judgment and, just treating ourselves with the same kindness that we would offer to a good friend.
So it's like giving ourselves permission to be perfectly imperfect.
Yes. And when we do that, it creates so much space for real growth and transformation.
Right.
Because it's rooted in self-acceptance, not self-criticism.
Yeah. This has been so insightful. I feel like I'm really starting to get the depth of this whole let them theory.
Okay.
It's not just about letting go of control in these specific situations. It's about cultivating this whole new way of being.
You got it. And I think what's so exciting is that this isn't just like theoretical. Robbins gives all these great examples of people who've like completely transformed their lives by really living this. And that's actually what we're going to talk about in part 3.
Oh, I can't wait to hear that. I think those stories are going to be super inspiring.
Yeah. But for now, I think what I want everyone listening to really take away is that let them is a journey. It's not a destination.
Right.
It's about showing up every day with curiosity and compassion and a willingness to let go of the things that are holding us back.
Welcome back to Books and Bites. We've been on this really interesting journey with the Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins.
Yeah, it's been pretty insightful, talking about how letting go of control can actually help you create a more fulfilling life.
It definitely has. We've covered so much ground already.
We have that illusion of control, right? The power of acceptance,
Right.
setting those boundaries, even just learning to reframe our perspectives.
And what I'm really finding fascinating is that this whole let them idea, it's not just about specific situations.
Right.
It's about a whole mindset shift.
It really is. It's like a different way of being in the world.
Exactly.
Yeah. And in this last part of our deep dive, I really want to touch on the ripple effects of this, of this mindset shift. Because Robbins, one of the things she really emphasizes is that let them doesn't just impact your life.
Right.
It has a huge impact on your relationships.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
When you approach people with more acceptance and less judgment, it just opens up more space for that authentic connection.
Exactly. Think
Yep.
about it, right?
Right.
Trying to force someone to change versus just accepting them for who they are.
Yeah.
When you let go of that need to control, it just opens up the doors for so much more, intimacy and real understanding.
It's almost like instead of trying to fit people into these boxes that we create for them, we allow them to just unfold in their own way.
Yeah. It allows you to see them more clearly, appreciate their strengths, even their quirks,
Right.
without feeling ugh, I need to change this about them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's what really builds deeper, more fulfilling relationships.
So it's we're shifting from this almost transactional approach to relationships.
Right.
Where it's always what am I getting out of this?
Yeah.
To a more transformative one where we're just present and open.
I love that. Transactional versus transformative.
Right.
That's so good. It really captures the essence of let them.
Yeah.
It's about showing up with an open heart and being willing to let go of all those expectations.
And when we do that, it's not just our relationships that benefit, but also I feel we experience this sense of inner peace.
100%. Robbins talks about how when people really let go of control, they often feel calmer.
Yeah.
More tranquil, because they're not constantly battling reality, trying to force it to be something it's not.
Right.
They're just accepting what is and focusing on what they can influence.
Yeah. It's almost like surrendering to the flow of life, trusting that things are going to unfold as they should, even if it's not exactly how we planned it.
And that surrender can actually be really empowering, because when you release the need to control every outcome, you start to tap into your own inner strength and resilience.
Yeah.
You learn to navigate challenges with more grace and flexibility.
So it's shifting from this rigid stance of trying to control everything to something way more fluid, adaptable. It's instead of trying to, hold back the tide, we're learning to ride the waves.
That is such a good analogy, and I think it really highlights another big part of let them.
What's that?
Letting go of perfectionism. Robbins really encourages us to embrace imperfection,
Great.
both in ourselves and in others.
I feel that's one of the hardest things to do in a world that's so obsessed with achieving this perfect version of success and happiness.
It is hard, but Robbins is basically saying that true joy and fulfillment, it actually comes from embracing those imperfections, celebrating our quirks, our differences. It's about letting go of the need to be perfect and just allowing ourselves to be, fully human.
So let them is about accepting others, accepting ourselves, and ultimately just accepting life as it unfolds.
Exactly. With all its messiness and unpredictability.
Yeah.
It's about realizing that true strength, it doesn't come from controlling everything. It comes from that willingness to kind of surrender to the mystery and wonder of it all.
This has been such an insightful exploration of the let them theory. And honestly, I feel I have a whole new framework for approaching not just, these specific situations, but just life in general.
I'm so glad to hear that. And if any of you listening out there are feeling inspired to really dive deeper into these ideas.
Yeah.
I highly recommend checking out the book for yourself.
Get your copy using the link in the episode description. And be sure to subscribe to Books and Bites for more insightful summaries.